Yo, I was watching this movie called The Strays, yo. So basically, you got this lady by the name of Cheryl. She's talking to her sister, I think. She was supposed to be involved with some dude named Mike. So apparently, she might have had a degree in something, but over the years, it hasn't been good to her. She pretty much feels like she's been on a downward spiral or whatever like that. So she basically dips off and doesn't answer the phone when the phone's ringing, and then they try to call the house phone. And the dude, Mike, leaves a message. He's like, "Hey, yo, pick up the phone." So basically, about 16 years later, she's got a new name. She goes by Nave. She got a husband named Ian and two siblings, a son named Sebastian and a daughter named Mary. Both of them actually attend private school. She's got this brand new accent trying to sound British and whatnot. She's actually one of the presidents of the school or whatever like that. And she's like doing charities and whatnot. And pretty much got a new leash on life. But there's one particular time she's driving on the road and she thinks she sees something. She keeps trying to look back. And she ends up crashing into this lady's car, some lady by the name of Amanda. But Ian's not tripping off it. He's got some, people or whatever like that. They're going to pay for the damages and all that. But the thing is, every time she gets stressed, she starts scratching the back of her head. So later on, she talks to this lady named Nia or whatever like that. We found out she's actually in charge of like the school choir or whatever. But the particular song that she wants them to sing is called Journey Through a Dead Man's Soul. I'm like, okay. The reason why she runs the student choir is because actually the teacher that's there, she's actually deaf. Which is kind of weird and ironic considering how they're running a choir, but okay. Like, Nave is there for moral support, but I just had to stop and think about that shit. How did this teacher who's deaf in sign language get to be a fucking choir director? You know what I'm saying? Like, anyway. So basically, she's making sure all the kids get to their classes and whatnot, and then Sebastian's talking to this dude, ends up being the janitor. But then she rushes him over, is like, tell him hurry up to get to class, you know what I'm saying? Don't talk to bums and stuff like that. I'm like, he's the fucking janitor of the school, like. So right at the back, you're thinking something's up with this shit, right? Now later on, when they're all back at the house and they're having dinner, Ian said he hired some black girl by the name of Abigail to help at his job because he had some type of like print shop or something. But she seemed kind of disturbed when he mentioned it was a black girl. Why the fuck is Nave so disturbed by this? So you got this one particular situation where she's driving in the car with her daughter Mary, and it's looking like she's seeing stuff again, and all of a sudden she almost crashes into another car. I'm like, yo, she don't need to be fucking driving. But she ends up dropping off Mary at a friend Jessica's house or something like that, right? Later on, Nave goes back to her husband Ian, you know what I'm saying? They have some alone time, get it cracking, you know what I'm saying? Smashing cheeks. But the thing is, she's very particular about her hair and whatnot. She has it all sorted out, certain different cone heads and stuff like that. Now, me, I'm just thinking to herself, she's just trying to protect her brand new persona and whatnot. Well, I guess it's not brand new. It's been like 16 years later, right? So then we get this situation at school, right? Where everybody's doing their choir practices and somebody flipped a fire alarm. So Nave as a director is trying to make sure everybody gets to their assorted places and whatnot. I think she ended up seeing Sebastian go somewhere. So she ended up following him into the woods and found out that Sebastian was trying to smoke and he put the cigarette down. And she's like, what are you doing back here? She's like, who gave it to you? He's like, I bought it for myself. She's like, don't play for no fool. And basically she sent her back into school. And after all this went down, she went back into school, but then she sees something about a bathroom. And then she went to herself, like, basically just went straight into the bathroom thinking somebody was there. Basically, when she went to one of the doors, I popped the janitor. They get into this little argument, and then he's like, yeah, you never meant to hurt me and Dion? She's like, I never meant to hurt you. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what is he talking about hurting? Like, what does that mean? So apparently before this, Nave went to the superintendent after she seen Sebastian talking to the janitor and tried to get him fired. But why would she go out of her way to get this man fired? So apparently the argument that happened in the bathroom, she must know him from somewhere. So basically it comes to a point where they having this like recital or whatever like that. Most of the people are charitable, you know what I'm saying? They're doing donations and gifts to like the choir and the school and things of that nature. So she made this whole contribution and everything like that. And then she was up there at the podium and trying to get the crowd to sing. So while the choir is singing, all of a sudden she turns around and she sees the janitor dude and then she starts rushing at him. And then she just flips out. She's like, why are you in my life? Why you keep following? Why you keep pestering me? And Carl just happened to be standing next to Dion. And at this point, both of them are just looking pissed off. So before we reveal anything, we gotta go back to 5 days earlier. Now, Carl and Dion are like driving over to this spot so they get this hotel and then work out. And then we see what goes on through their daily activities. Carl was the one that actually got hired to be a janitor, and Dion was able to get the job working with Ian. That's right, Dion is actually Abigail. They both looked up information on Nave, and during the days, Abigail basically confronts Mary. She tells him about that they're working with her dad and she wanted to be best friends, so they clicked up, whatever. But they're really only friends because she wants to get a look at more of their photos or whatever like that. So, they switched their Instagram names and stuff. And as far as Carl, he's been befriended in Sebastian. Now, there was this one situation before where Sebastian was coming home late from basketball practice. But he was like 3 hours late and he wasn't with the team and everybody was getting worried. And eventually he did come home, but I'm going to tell you all about that in a minute. So earlier we found out there's this one guy that's on the basketball team that's been bullying Sebastian or whatever. And Carl just happened to notice it. And that's what he was first talking to Sebastian about when they first was in the hallway, and that's when Nave noticed that he was talking or whatever. And when the situation he went out in the woods, Carl was actually giving him a cigarette to smoke. And obviously Sebastian didn't tell his mother where he got it from, because he tried to claim they were his. Now the scene where Nave and Mary was driving in the car and she almost hit somebody or whatever, she was supposed to drop her off at Jessica's house. Turns out, Abigail was the one that met her up there after she left. Alright, now let's get to the infamous basketball scene. Sebastian was scoring, he scored the game-winning shot and all that. Carl was watching the matchup the whole time, and he was basically chilling with Carl. So the reason it took him so long to come home is because Sebastian was chilling with Carl afterwards. They ended up going to this spot smoking weed. Then he wanted to test his patience. He told him to stand up and then look down. They was on this bridge and it's like a far leap down, you know what I'm saying? So at that point, you think to yourself, Carl's gonna push him off the edge, but obviously he didn't because he was able to come home. But I think in his way, he was basically testing him to make sure he got tougher or whatever like that, you know, so he can handle bullies. So for some apparent reason, the bully was walking home by himself. And all of a sudden, while he was walking, he saw Sebastian out at one point. Then Carl jumps behind him and then puts a bag over his head. And he tells Sebastian to bash his brains in with a freaking basketball. I'm like, what the fuck? So I'm like, what happened to the bully? Did he just like break his nose? All you heard was a crunching sound. I'm like, how the heck could you do that with just a basketball? Maybe he just broke his nose or something. I don't know. So basically, that's why he was so late getting home that day. So I know the question you're asking, why are Carl and Dion doing all this? Well, come to find out, they're actually Nave's kids, the kids that she ran away from. Basically, after all the smoke blowed over, Nave finally ends up telling her husband and the kids the truth. Well, somewhat. She still didn't tell him her real name. I'm like, that's crazy. But she gives this kind of like long drawn out speech and they still got to, you know, stick together as a family and whatnot, giving all this sob story and whatnot. But she still sounds clearly unsure of herself. But then she said something about she had to get away from her ex-husband. Now, all she said at that point was she was saying that he's just a bad man, very dangerous. And she never even wanted to have her second child back then. Basically talking about Dion. Now, we don't know what happened in the history between Cheryl and Mike. They never really explained in detail. But apparently it was bad enough for her to get the fuck out of there and abandon her kids. So bottom line is her immediate family now is trying to do their best to stick together. But she ends up calling up Carl and Dion and making sure that she meets up with them personally at this diner. Now she tries to give this like sob story. Obviously they ain't trying to hear that shit. Bottom line, she writes them both a check giving them $10,000 apiece. So at that point, she's thinking everything's all good and they end up going back to London. Let me tell you right now, that shit ain't all good. Here comes the family reunion scene. Now, Carl and Dion end up coming back to the house at night. The thing is, they end up breaking in the house. Now, the thing is, when they broke in the house, no alarm went off or nothing. I'm thinking to myself, like, y'all got an alarm system? Bottom line is, if they got an alarm system, it sucks. So they basically just rolling around the house. You see all four of their cell phones or whatever like that, which I thought is stupid. How come all their cell phones are just lined up in the kitchen? Well, anyway, Carl puts the cell phones in the sink, turns on the water, and just leaves that shit running. Dion goes in the bathtub. She turns the water on that and leaves that shit running. Dion starts fixing toast. Carl puts on this little robe. And at this point, I thought nobody was in the house. They were just going to break in, rob some shit or do something like that. Turns out everybody is in the house. They're all asleep. So they basically wanted them all to wake up on purpose. So everybody wakes up. Carl tells them all, you know, it's Dion's birthday. And it's very much intense. He asks them to order like Chinese food. It's too late for Chinese food, so they got to get it through Uber Eats or whatever, DoorDash or some shit. And then he gets them all together to sit down and they're playing like Scrapple. He gets Nave or Cheryl to set up the table. And at this point, it's such a crazy ass scene because you're thinking to yourself, like, what is the goal here? What are they trying to accomplish right now? But basically, Carl and Dion are like, look, we're all going to sit around as a family, you know what I'm saying, play games. Meanwhile, the water's still running and shit. And then Ian flat out just says he wants a divorce. But Cheryl, Sebastian, and Ian and Mary, they're all nervous or whatever like that. So they're all going to play by the rules, you know what I'm saying, and sit as a family, you know what I'm saying? So it gets to a point where Carl spazzes out and he's looking at his mom, Cheryl, like, yeah, you think you could just buy us off with $20,000? Like, you basically missed almost 20 years of our life. So that's like $1,000 a year. Think about all the stuff we got to pay for, all the abuse we had to take. Like I said, they didn't get deep into it, but you can pretty much make your own assumptions what exactly they're talking about when it comes to this abuse from, like, you know, their dad and whatever else happened in the history. See, the thing is, Nave thought she left her kids to their aunt or her sister that called her at the beginning of the movie. But it turns out sister actually was the one that gave them away. So who knows, they were end up either being in poverty or went back with their dad. Who knows the situation because they don't go depth into detail with it. So we get this scene where Carl pulls this big ass machete out of his bag. And Ian mentioned a while ago he has a workout, you know, like a little gym inside of his house. But Ian said before he barely even used it. So Carl's like, we're going to put your skills to the test and we're going to go to the gym. So he's basically got him on the bench press, like lifting weights and whatnot. Now, clearly it's too much for him to lift, but Carl's not going to let him stop. Then all of a sudden the doorbell rings. Nave goes to the door. It turns out it's a Chinese man, you know what I'm saying? They're getting their food. But she tells him to stay there, you know what I'm saying, so she can bring down a tip for him. So she comes back in the room, puts the food on the table. She looks in the gym and sees what's going on with him. But at that point, we couldn't see what was actually happening. All we heard was Ian screaming. So she asks Sebastian where her purse is. It's like it's probably upstairs. So she goes upstairs to get her purse. Then all of a sudden, when she's coming back downstairs, we hear a crunching, and we don't hear Ian screaming no more. So we're like, oh shit, this nigga's dead. So then Cheryl goes outside to tip the delivery man. Next thing you see, Carl comes back to the living room and is like, hey, where's Cheryl? All you hear is a guy getting attacked on the outside and a motorcycle revving off. You're like, holy shit. She just left all her kids again. And that's how the movie went off. I'm like, are you fucking with me, yo? The whole reason this shit happened is because you left your kids 16 years ago. And now because your kids are coming back to do some things, you leave your kids and your other kids. Basically, she ain't shit. Self-preservation. At the expense of all your kids. There's so much to impact from this, but you know what I'm saying? Check the movie out for yourself and you let me know what's up. The Strays on Netflix.